Welcome back to the Business Leaders of America podcast, where business leaders come to share their advice and journeys to success with existing and emerging leaders of America. Now, here's your host, Dylan Bloyd.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Business Leaders of America podcast. Today, we're joined by a powerhouse in global law, public policy, and international business, Dean Fealk. Dean is an award-winning international attorney, best-selling author, and civic leader who serves as the Northern California Managing Partner Emeritus at DLA Piper, one of the most influential law firms in the world. He's advised multinational companies on over $50 billion in cross-border transactions and held leadership roles on global boards and fellowships that span diplomacy, trade, and democratic development. In this episode, we'll dive into how Dean helps companies navigate the complexities of international expansion, the impact of recent U.S. tariffs on trade, and how legal strategy can align with global growth. Dean, welcome to the show.
Dylan, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we were able to connect.
Yes, I am as well. Well, I can't wait to get this going because, you've built a career that bridges law, public policy, global trade, and civic leadership. What originally sparked your interest in working across sectors, and how has that interdisciplinary approach shaped your success?
Well, I grew up in the Midwest in Michigan. I had the great opportunity of interning in the state Senate in Michigan when I was in college. So I became interested in politics and policy and government and how people organize themselves and how decisions are made to allocate resources. And so, I've been interested in policy generally for a long time. And as I had the opportunity to get out in the world a little more, graduate school in London and studying in international affairs, in my career, I've spent about 6 years abroad, including, significant stints in East Asia and Korea. Human beings and societies have a lot of similarities.
Right.
And so, and by the same token, a lot of the dynamics that unfold in our country are not limited by political borders. So, my goal has been to make an impact from the private sector, but also to get involved in my community in the civic space. We face a lot of really complex challenges, and it requires sometimes a whole of society approach. Some of the kind of challenges we might talk about today, they require, the private sector, the public sector, the NGO space, academia, journalism, everybody to come together. So I think cross-disciplinary is just another way of saying you got to bring a lot of tools forward to solve complex problems.
Right. Yeah, I cannot imagine the kind of conflicts that you have to deal with, and having to get people to come together, especially on international terms, right? And people are just probably on such different sides of the spectrum. Is that a big issue a lot of the time, when people are trying to work these deals out?
Yeah, look, in the private space, and if we're talking about, businesses looking at transactions, then it really is a lot about coming to terms, finding the right consideration and the right terms for the deal, and really making it work for everyone, and hopefully, for a broader society. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot we don't agree on these days in society and across societies. So, diplomacy is in some ways bridging those divides and finding common ground where we can kind of move forward. Nobody, of course, ever gets everything they want in the course of a negotiation of any stripe, but people should walk away from a negotiation feeling that they've had their voice heard, that the terms are fair. That is the key at the end of the day.
Right. How long do those negotiations typically take? Because obviously it's not happening in a day, right? But I'm sure it's a wide array of different types. But how often, or what's typical for you?
In the private sector, it can be weeks or months, depending on the scope and scale of an initiative or a transaction. Government to government, it can take years.
Right.
A multilateral negotiation, if you're talking about a huge multilateral trade deal or otherwise, many, many years. And some of those things never are completed.
Right.
So, you know, the frequency of change may be somewhat dictated by political cycles, by human mortality, or the lifespan of a human being.
Yeah.
Uh, but societies are moving faster and faster,
Right.
and the pace of technological change obviously is picking up.
Yeah.
So it's important that we move with purpose, and we don't want to be trying to address yesterday's issues. And if processes for conflict resolution move too slowly, they're not really useful, are
Right.
they?
Right.
Right. So, but on the other hand, look, I mean, to your point, Dylan, I mean, bringing people together giving people the right mechanism to be heard and to solve complex problems can take time,
Right.
and in a sense shouldn't be rushed. So the goal is to have really constructive outcomes. So there's
Right.
a tension. There's definitely a tension to moving quickly, wanting to get some momentum, wanting
Yeah.
to complete, a negotiation, but by the same token, doing things right. And in the context of, a private sector transaction, you want a deal you can live with.
Yeah.
A lot of times parties are looking for some kind of synergy, meaning
Yeah.
that the whole ultimately is greater than the sum of the parts. So it's really important to do things in a way that the organization, let's say the surviving organization, can be successful
Hmm.
afterwards. We talk about, we do a lot of work, what we call post-merger integration, right? They bring together two organizations, but you don't want them to remain separate,
Right.
right? You want to be able to take advantage, bring together complementary parts, have economies of scale. When you have a bigger, broader organization, whether that's more geographic footprint or more human capital in a certain area and so forth. So
Yeah.
sometimes what follows a transaction can be as important as the terms of the transaction itself.
Right. No, I believe it. I know you've done this for a long time and you're amazing at what you do, but it takes a special someone to be able to probably stay motivated doing this, right? I mean, like, especially a deal that takes that long. Is it hard to stay motivated when it's taking years at a time?
Well, I think my sense is that in order to stay motivated in our professional lives and our careers, we have to keep things, interesting.
Right.
Now, sometimes it's interesting. I think if you're in professional services, as I am,
Yeah.
or in the law, um, you can have a range of clients.
Hmm.
Maybe work with a range of industries, different industries. So that type of variation can help keep things fresh, which I think in turn can help keep you motivated.
Right.
Uh, but I think it's important. I mean, we're seeing more varied careers and more dynamic careers than I think we saw even a generation ago. And
Yeah.
so, and not just in professional services, but people are moving from the private practice of law, in-house, government, academia. People are doing so many different things in the space of one career. I think that does keep it fresh and helps us to stay motivated, hopefully. But it's true. I mean, if you try to spend many years focused on the same problems, your thinking can get stale.
Yes.
It-
Yeah.
uh, you can miss things.
Hmm.
definitely need, this is why organizations need to have young blood, new
Right.
ideas. Like it's
Right.
incredibly important. And I think the same dynamic or the same concept is true within our careers. Try to stay motivated by doing interesting things
Hmm.
and being open-minded and meeting interesting people.
Right. Yeah. When I was doing my research on you, I'm like, how does he do all of this? How do you balance it all?
Well, that's kind of you to say.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that's being written and said about work-life balance.
Right. Right.
Some people say in any given moment you can't really have it because professional life is so consuming.
Right.
Personal life is incredibly demanding. Other people have different capacities, I think, to take on more and more. There's some people that are in my network that I just marvel at,
Yeah.
and I sometimes think, well, maybe they could benefit from, focusing more on fewer projects. But then I see that they seem to somehow get more energy and more capacity, counterintuitively, right?
Yeah.
From taking more on. So I don't think there's one, really one size fits all, but I certainly know when I'm being spread too thin.
Right. Right.
Or if I don't have something new, a new kind of project or a
Mm.
new initiative or a new relationship in my life, professional relationship, where I feel like there is something inspiring me. I
Right.
certainly feel it. So I guess finding the right balance of things, but I mean, fundamentally, you know, um, if there is a piece of advice that may have some broader application, obviously don't be willing to get out of your comfort zone,
Right. Right. Yeah.
right? It's okay to
Yeah.
sometimes be a generalist among specialists. I
Hmm.
mean, the world is specialized. Our profession is highly specialized. And be a specialist. By all means, be a specialist. It's really important. But if you're looking to kind of broaden your perspective,
Yes.
broaden your involvement, then you can get involved in something and be a generalist.
Right.
And you be uncomfortable, but maybe you learn a lot and you bring that perspective, to the table. I've been serving here in California on the Workforce Development Board, and
Right.
certainly I was not a workforce development expert going in, but hopefully. By bringing perspectives of a lot of the clients that we're working with in technology and how they think about skills, right, and their workforces, hopefully that's a valuable perspective, for the board, or my work on leading the Northern California District Export Council, and
Yeah.
how exporters think about economic development and growing their businesses. Might that be a valuable perspective to then bring back to the Workforce Development Board? So I think just the desire to want to do new things, try new things, learn new things, and that willingness to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and not be, again, like if you're like me and you've been, working your craft for 25 years,
Hmm.
I'm dating myself. Um, hopefully you're pretty competent at something as a specialist. That's great.
Right.
But then does that mean that you don't want to try new things where maybe you're a neophyte,
Yeah.
But it's great to learn. We all need to learn. If we stop learning, we're going to atrophy. We're not going to really survive and thrive, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely. I think I had a guest recently who talked about that where there's no status, well, where you're just staying still, right? You're either improving or declining, right? So I think you're spot on with that. I think that, and you're absolutely right. I think there is room for specialists and there's people who are room for generalists. We need both, right? So be good at a lot of things or great at a couple things or a mix of both, right?
And being a generalist, I think in some ways, if you're willing to wear the hat of a generalist,
Yes.
you broaden your relationships because people may seek you out, seek your input
Yes.
on a broader range of issues,
Yeah.
or think that pay you the compliment of thinking that you are a broad thinker or somebody who's just bringing general analytical skills
Yeah.
to whatever they're trying to solve. I
Hmm.
think that's really important. So I guess I would say you know, again, be a specialist, but also be a generalist. I think one without the other is really only half the picture.
You're right. Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited to get into talking about, DLA Piper and talking about international, trade, everything you've been doing, because like we talked about in the intro, you've overseen billions in cross-border transactions. What would you say the biggest challenges U.S. companies face when expanding internationally, and how do you help them navigate those challenges?
Well, I mean, it's been the case, for many decades that U.S. companies have looked, abroad for new markets, for new sources of talent, R&D. Um, so the idea of having a business and being able to tap into, to be international and global in ambition is
Yeah.
nothing new at all, and does require a lot of upfront thinking and planning and being able to navigate different sets of rules and regulations, and business cultures. I mean, this has this is there's a whole canon of literature on this, but
Yeah.
also the moment we live in, obviously, in some ways, is seen as particularly challenging. I don't know, everything with some historical distance, we can maybe put into a slightly better or broader framework.
Yeah.
But I would say right now, a lot of U.S. companies that we're working with, they really want certainty. They want to know. I mean, they want to be able to plan longer term about growing their businesses, and they want to know that they're going to be doing business in a stable world,
Yeah.
right? Where geopolitical or geoeconomic strife will not upend their supply chain, or their some of their go-to-market strategies.
Hmm.
They want more predictability. They absolutely do want to tap a global market for talent,
Yeah.
possible. Um, and so, but there's the world in many ways appears more chaotic,
Hmm.
I think, than it had since the kind of the end of the Cold War. We had
Yeah.
we had a period of not just relative peace and prosperity, but it seemed like, it seemed like trade relationships were getting more open, rather than more protectionist. But of course, a lot of that is changing, at least in the moment. So
Right.
companies need to be more nimble. It doesn't mean that they're going to stay home. They are not. They are not staying. They don't feel that they can afford to stay home, especially if you're in, an industry that requires a lot of scale, or a lot of, capital investment. You can't afford to say, "Well, I'm just going to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond." It's not going to work,
Right.
right? And so fortune favors the bold, and
Right.
U.S. companies, still have much of the greatest talent in the world. They've got deep capital markets. For the moment, knock wood, our rule of law is holding. I'm a hopeless optimist. So we have so much to draw upon, and U.S. companies, as I say, they are looking at a global market by necessity, and myself, others, trusted advisors that really, I think, in the case of for our organization, we have expertise in 90 plus cities around the world.
Yeah.
Just as importantly, I think the experience of that we bring to the table in terms of, well, this is what a similarly situated, organization, in terms of stage of development, right,
Mm-hmm.
would consider, or these are some of the market trends, or strong market practices. That's really a lot of the value add, I think,
Right.
because companies just like people, they want to learn, hopefully, from other people's mistakes,
Yes.
other people's successes, for that matter.
Right. Right.
So there's still tremendous opportunity. Volatility is correlated, risk is correlated to reward. It's always
Yes.
the case in business. In some ways, it means that, that things are more fraught, and you don't want to be imperiled,
Right.
but the opportunities are greater,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Yes.
that's exciting, but it just means you have to be even more thoughtful, I think, and more nimble and more thoughtful about what you're doing, as a business.
Right. Right. From an outsider's perspective, it almost feels like maybe this is because the current administration, not to get too political, but it almost feels like it's more encouraged right now to bring business to the U.S. from the international versus expanding out. Is that similar to what you're experiencing?
I think there are elements. There are elements of that. There are elements of reshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring. They were thinking about like supply chains.
Right.
Some of the kind of unfettered forces of globalization seemed, absolutely are less in vogue, because of things we're talking about,
Right.
various conflicts around the world, political forces of populism and nativism and protection. Like all of those things are absolutely, exist. But look. Um, Diversification in some ways is even more important in
Right.
times of greater turmoil, right? And
Yes.
so, we're hearing more about, Europe, for example, has been in recent decades, has not had a tech champion, has been lower growth generally than the United States.
Yeah.
But having said that, everything is subject to change,
Yeah.
and
Shifting a bit.
everything relative. And Europe is, they have now some of their capital markets are seen as undervalued. They are now loosening their purse strings with and fiscal policy, so they're spending more on, yes, defense, right?
Hmm.
Some would say belatedly, but also the infrastructure that goes with it.
Yeah.
So, we're seeing multinationals that want to do more investment in Europe than they've wanted to in the past, right?
Hmm.
So there's all these kind of interesting second and third order effects, and we can call it kind of a law of unintended consequences. But you're right. There's definitely an instinct, to be more defensive and stay
Yes.
home. But then the mirror image, an opportunity pops up in Europe, or because of the demographic challenges in the rich world, the OECD and other countries, we're getting a fresher look at some places in Africa
Wow.
that that I hadn't heard that discussed for quite some time. And
Yeah.
now it seems like, in our life, certainly in our lifetimes, we're going to see some very, very interesting things in developing markets that I think that we hadn't seen.
Hmm.
So,
Right. Right. Yeah.
so I'm always hesitant to get too caught up in the political moment,
Right.
rather than let's kind of apply historical lessons if we can,
Yeah.
and think about, yes, there's an interconnectivity, and one door might close, but that means that some other door will open, as
Yes.
a corollary.
Yeah. And what's best opportunities for the business, right? I mean, why wouldn't you want to think about that? And so I understand that there's tensions on both
Right.
sides, but at the same time, like you should really think about what's going to be best, and at the same time for the end consumer, right?
But also, like, think about, I mean, just to state the obvious, like, from a pure technological standpoint, right? We are now, the companion to entrepreneurs kind of having a lower barrier to entry,
Yeah.
and being able to expand very quickly, right? They've been able to use the internet, IT tools, and
Yes.
now AI. But I think the companion to that is they can now go overseas
Yeah.
very quickly, right? There's less friction there. And you and I are obviously having this interview, and we're in two different states,
Right.
right? So I mean, how would you try to frame the kind of technological pull that's bringing us together, right? And maybe two kind of business opportunities together against political forces, right? And that in a moment may seem more centrifugal,
Right.
right?
Right.
What's stronger?
Yeah.
Uh, I'm a little biased. I think the political feels stronger in the moment,
Yes.
but human ingenuity is in the end wins out.
Right. Right. There's great minds everywhere,
As
right?
a
You're not.
techno optimist, Dylan,
Yeah.
you're going to folks in Northern
Right.
California.
Right. Exactly. Have the tariffs been a challenge? Recent tariffs been a huge challenge for you and your clients?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, there's the immediate effects of tariffs,
Hmm.
which is to say, our goods, getting more expensive and our
Yeah.
input more expensive? And does that mean it's going to eat into a profit margin, or how do you pass it along to your customer? Those kinds of things are really challenging if you have a product that could be subject to tariffs. But even more, I think the second and third order effects are, how are the markets responding,
Yeah.
right? Because and I know, markets are now, we'll see, depending on when folks listen to this, this podcast, like the
Yes.
markets are now at an all-time high. They seem to have shrugged it off, but there has been volatility along the way.
Hmm.
That means there are companies that had looked at an IPO that maybe delayed those plans, or so pricing in the public market will make its way down to the private markets. The tariffs, if they start manifesting in more inflation, that will make its way into monetary policy and the Fed's decisions, and that certainly will affect, a huge swath
Yeah.
of corporate America.
Right.
So I have to tell you that the tariffs are incredibly influential in how our economy ultimately performs in a given quarter or year, and even longer term. I have my own political, my own
Right.
policy beliefs, political and policy, about what it means to live in a world where there's less, where terms of trade
Hmm.
are more protectionist, and that's maybe a drag on business. And if you go and take economics classes in undergraduate or graduate school, you learn about comparative advantages, and you
Yeah.
think about these sort of things. And so we'll see. I guess a lot of it will wait and see. You never know. These are complex puzzles. You never know which kind of force will carry the day in a given scenario. But I think longer term, I personally would like to see more rather than less trade, more rather than less international economic engagement. We do want to see what we think are fair terms of trade.
Yeah.
There are stakeholders that want to see trade that recognizes workers in the environment. Like, all of these things need to be
Right.
taken for sure.
Right. Right. Speaking of terms, it always seems like there's got to be one side or the other that's, a little bit that's going to probably does a little bit more than the other, right? It's rare that I'm sure that it's 50-50 across the board. But a lot of the time with the issues that arise, is it greed? Like where people want, the one side wants more than what they're being offered? Do you run into that a lot of the time?
I would hesitate to maybe use exactly that terminology. I think you know, it's it's quite natural for any kind of side in a negotiation to want to
To
maximize
want more, right?
its own outcome.
Right.
And I think it is that process and that tension that it is important to coming to the right result. Having said that, I think we should always be building, relationships, whether it's in our personal lives or at an organizational level or
Yeah.
as nation states. And, some of these are Pyrrhic victories. There's
Yeah.
a lot of talk about being transactional, like, oh, we have more leverage in a given situation because they need us more than we need them.
Yes.
Therefore, we can exert our greater leverage, and in a zero-sum game, we will, get a better result. But the problem with that is, you know, you may need them later.
Yes. Yeah.
You need to draw upon a reservoir of goodwill that you've depleted.
Right.
So, kind of coming full circle, Dylan, to earlier in our conversation, like you don't want people walking away feeling that they've gotten the short end of the stick, that they
Yeah.
have gotten, inadequate results in some way. So I just don't believe that. I think there's usually for resourceful people of goodwill, you
Right.
can find an outcome that serves everyone. Now, it doesn't
Hmm.
mean you don't walk away. It doesn't mean that everybody walks away from the table feeling euphoric.
Of
That's just
course.
not reality. But
Right.
you don't want people, again, if you want to build relationships, build towards, longer term cooperation always.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why there's people out there like you, great negotiators who can help people see, the greatest outcome on both ends, right?
Well, we try to look in the legal side. We represent our clients, and we
Right. Of
want
course.
very strong representation. So we do try to get what we can. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
But hopefully, they also have counsel on the other side, and there's a lot of reasonable heads prevailing and mutual respect that I think you can come to
Right. Right.
strong outcomes.
For sure. Well, that is a topic that I'm excited to talk about because, the legal side of things, it's already difficult enough, having your, regulations and rules in your own country. But when you're expanding out to another country, I mean, obviously the challenges probably only increase, right? So how do you help your businesses and clients with their legal strategy?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremostly, understand their business as best you can, and deeper and deeper over time, and build that institutional knowledge. Understand their objectives,
Yeah.
right? Because the first thing is it's always important to ask the right questions.
Right.
So I think really good advisors don't just answer questions,
Mm,
they help you frame the right questions. Or they'll sometimes say, you're asking some really good questions. We will get to those answers, of
yeah.
course. But maybe a different threshold question is this. Or maybe we can think about reframing it a little differently. Because
Yeah.
again, if they're engaging you because you've been in these kinds of scenarios, then it may be that there's a different way to think about things. To
Right.
me, that's a really great advisor that can help you do that. But you have to listen to your client, right? And so if you offer up a different perspective and they're not particularly, they're locked in, then okay, I mean, they are the client, they are the principal, so they
Yeah.
will drive the direction. But I think it's your duty as a trusted advisor to offer up, to try to reframe questions, bring new perspectives, and a lot of times they are absolutely appreciated and honored.
Oh, yeah, definitely. How much research goes into that before you actually enter into another country with doing business with them? Is there a lot of research beforehand?
Well, the short answer is yes, but part of our value proposition is that we are, depending on the legal issue, depending on the country in question, right? We've seen it before. So
Got it.
we don't want to reinvent, hey, we're thinking about doing this in the Netherlands. What are the employment or exchange control or securities issues, for example? If we've seen those things before,
Yeah.
it's much more efficient to say, okay, this has been looked at, this is understood. Like we're not starting from scratch.
Right.
So, but having said that, the broader the geographic scope for a particular initiative, 5 countries, 10 countries, 20 countries, what have you, and rules are constantly changing. Governments
Right.
change, rules change, policies change, laws change. So I think our point is we want to leverage what we know to be the case, draw upon our incredible colleagues, partners' expertise around the world. You know what I mean? In
Yes.
the most efficient way possible. That's a really great. That's if when we do that, it's a great value for the client.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point as well, is how are you staying on top of all the changing rules and regulations in all the different countries? Is there technology that helps you guys with that? Because it's got to be impossible to stay on
Yeah,
top of all that.
we've got a great. Yes, of course. We've got a great team. We've got great knowledge management. We have
Yeah.
great tools. We as a firm, we've been out front and ahead of the curve in terms of AI adoption.
Nice.
So the technology gets better, the tools get better, the team. We keep upskilling as well. So
Right.
absolutely, you need all of those things.
Right.
All of those. And then it helps to, on top of that, have really smart people
Yes.
all over the world is important. And then, they make you look good.
Right. Yes. You're right. Thank you so much for touching on that. That's pretty amazing. I did want to shift gears a little bit because now that we're talking about, the tech innovations and stuff, what innovations or emerging trends in the legal profession are you most excited about, right now, particularly for startups and tech, the tech ecosystem?
Um, I have to say, I have to say everything AI is creating such incredible changes. It's being the applications are being adopted very quickly.
Right.
The productivity gains, I think we are starting to see in a lot of places hit stride. So it's a incredible force multiplier for us, for our clients. As we were talking about a little earlier,
Yeah.
the idea of, just a couple of people, a very small team with a great idea and a great solution, leveraging, a modest amount of seed capital. What can be done today is just extraordinary. So it's hard not to get excited about that. Although, it's the change, the pace of change is so blistering that, of course, it causes a lot of strain on society, and there will be a lot of adaptation. So that's exciting. You know, fintech,
Hmm.
the way that we move money and use money and deploy tools in e-commerce in a society that's increasingly e-commerce driven is very exciting. A lot of
Yeah.
our clients either in the space or adjacent to financial technologies, incredibly exciting. And your kids and
Hmm.
my kids, like, they're not going to live in a world where spending money, and they don't live in a world where spending money or transmitting money is done by the same financial uh,
Yeah.
the same financial institutions of the 19th century. It's
Right.
not going to be the case. And a different perspective on money, a different perspective on money as a store of value, as transmitting value, and all of these things. So I think that's extremely exciting. There's a lot of opportunities. I think it's only going to make our lives and commerce more efficient and more dynamic. I
Mhm.
don't think it's something to be feared. And just to say it, yes, the major financial institutions will have a great place in this ecosystem.
Yeah.
Uh, there's just room for so much more.
Right, right. I've heard that a lot where they say, maybe not in our lifetime, but I feel like with as fast as technology is rapidly improving and changing, I feel like it is going to be in our lifetime. I feel like it's happening so quickly, just from the last 10, 15 years is ridiculous. So I can only imagine the next 5.
I mean, the technologists and the futurists, and you have to sometimes, it's good to talk to those kinds of people. You also have to be a little careful, as
Right.
the range of views are so broad. But many of them who have predicted with some degree of accuracy, several cycles of innovation are saying you cannot look out. You can't ask somebody to look out more than 5 years.
Right, right.
Anybody purports to be able to tell you they know what a particular sector or segment's going to look like in 10 years.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're talking about. There's no
Right.
way they can.
No, exactly. And I feel like that's even going to shrink. It's even going to be less
Yes.
than 5 soon. It's going to be, you can't look out past 2
Right.
years.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's absolutely right. So, I don't know. It's exciting. I
it
mean, look,
is.
we all, it's completely normal to feel uncomfortable. But we have to go back to first principles in terms of wanting to have our growth mindset, wanting to continue to develop ourselves, wanting to bring the best resources and ideas to bear on solutions, as we were talking about. So
Yeah.
there's no the secrets to adaptation are not new.
No, exactly. No, it's going to happen whether you like it or not. You're going to have to adapt. Some people it's still seeing people saying like, I'm not going to use AI. It's you're using AI every day. I mean, it's just you're going to have to get
Right.
with it with the times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's that's pretty funny. All right. Well, Dean, this has been amazing. I really appreciate you joining today. I did want to ask you, how can listeners stay connected with your work, learn more about what you're doing at DLA Piper, and pick up your book, Impact the World?
Yeah. Check the book out on Amazon. Love to see you on LinkedIn, in particular. You can certainly, we have publicly available bios and the DLA Piper website. So, of course, feel free to check us out. We're not hard to find. I'm not
Yeah.
hard to find. Always love to hear new ideas and be connected to new people. And Dylan, thank you so much for the interview. A lot of fun, and I'm a big fan of what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I did actually have one more question, just because this is one little piece maybe from the book that you can mention. But, I did want to ask for the entrepreneurs out there who are listening, who want to expand internationally or make a greater civic impact. What's one mindset or strategy they should adapt today?
I mean, learn, and learn. I think, again, I think the world we live in, there's more information available than ever and great ideas. Your podcast, course, getting out there and learning, and again, reaching out to people. Maybe this is a privileged standpoint, and I'm a white collar, person in a big, in a big urban area. But in general, I do find I get emails from, you know, a college student, asking me a question, or I think people are more accessible,
Yeah.
right, than they
Yes.
have been. So if you're a go-getter, I mean, it is kind of amazing in this world, the kinds of access to new ideas and fresh thinking. People want to talk about what they're doing,
Yes.
right? And so I think have that mindset that you want to be in touch with people who are making an impact and doing the kinds of things that you may want to do. Follow them, reach out to people, join organizations, whether they're online or in your community. There's a great ways to expand your ideas and your network and have more impact. So I would say, yeah, stay curious. get out there and keep moving forward.
Amazing, Dean. That is great advice. Thank you so much. Again, thank you for joining me today, and listeners, I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Dylan.